following subject matter is real and only intended for mature audiences. Discretion is advised.
People are dead after deputies say a man went on a shooting rampage.
I knew a week before she died I was going to kill her.
I can tell you the scene out there is absolutely horrific.
Nobody knows where this individual may strike next.
This is 10-Minute Murder.
Hi, I'm Joe, the host of 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for joining today, part 2 of the story of BTK, Dennis Rader. If you've somehow stumbled upon this episode and have not yet listened to part 1, you may want to quickly check that one out first before listening to this one. I mean, it's not mandatory, but part 1 gives you an idea of the way Dennis Rader was raised and how he lived, trying to blend in to the people around him and seem as normal as possible. But what is normal? Normal is subjective, and Dennis had enough people fooled long enough to keep himself out of prison for a very long time. This episode will talk about how in the end, he got himself caught because he had to brag about what he had done. Dennis Rader is a proud serial killer that flew so well under the radar, even his closest friends, his family, and church groups had no idea. A literal monster living next door, taking your son on a Boy Scout camping trip, teaching him how to tie a variety of knots. He was the guy that brought the salad and the spaghetti to the church supper. And by the way, this episode is going to be a little bit longer than normal. This is BTK, Dennis Rader, Part 2. On the afternoon of January 15th, 1974, Wichita PD officers responded to a call at 803 North Edgemore Street. 3 teenagers of the Otero family had found their father and mother dead after returning home from school. When the police stepped inside the white corner bungalow, they saw an open billfold on the kitchen and a purse on the floor with all of its contents dumped out. They kept moving into the southwest bedroom, where there they discovered the first victim. 38-year-old Joseph Otero laid on the floor, his hands bound behind him and his ankles tied with a white cord. Joseph also had a plastic bag over his head, held on by a rope, but one of the children cut it off in hopes their father was still alive. But unfortunately, it was too late. On the bed, not far from her husband, was the mother of the family, 33-year-old Julie. She also had her ankles and hands tied, and she had been strangled. Both bodies were already cold and stiff. There was nothing to be done. Sadly, these two were not the only victims. The children who had discovered the bodies of their parents had not investigated the home any further, but now police found 2 more bodies. 9-year-old Joseph Jr. was in another bedroom, hands and ankles tied and a pillowcase over his head, covered with 2 plastic bags and a t-shirt. Then, while an officer was investigating the basement, he made another gruesome discovery. 11-year-old Josephine's body was hanging from a sewer pipe in a storage area. She was still wearing her sweatshirt and socks, but her panties were pulled down and her bra had been cut. A dried substance found on her leg would later turn out to be semen. Somebody had watched her die while pleasuring themselves. What the investigators did not yet know was the fact that Josephine had been the last one to die after she watched a man slowly strangle and suffocate her parents and younger brother. That man had then dragged her to the basement, where he began to strangle her too. Josephine cried for her mother before asking the killer what would become of her. "Well, honey, you're going to heaven tonight with the rest of your family," answered Dennis Rader. Dennis had finally turned his fantasies into reality. He had spied on the new Hispanic family for a while that had moved into a corner house at Edgemore and Murdoch. You see, Dennis had a thing for Hispanic women, and he admired their dark hair and beauty, and so he felt like he had found the perfect victim candidates. It was time for action. Dennis put together his kit, including a gun, cords, knives, and various tools for breaking in. By observing the Otero house, he had learned what the family's daily schedule was like, and so he knew when the best time was to strike. And still, there were surprises. After all, it was Dennis's first time. On the morning of January 15th, Dennis snuck into the yard of the Otero house and cut the phone line. But when he barged in the back door, things were not as he expected. The man of the house, Joseph, was still at home, and so was their rather vicious dog. Still, when you have a gun in your hand, most people will do what you say. Dennis was able to control all 4 people in the house and eventually tie them down and brutally murder them one after another. One thing that Dennis learned from his first killings was the fact that strangling a human is much more challenging and takes much longer time than it does in movies. But still, he had done it, and now he felt more alive than ever before. After finally getting the first taste of taking a human life, it didn't take long for Dennis to kill again. On April 4th, he broke into the home of 21-year-old Catherine Bright through the back porch door. Dennis had been stalking the young woman for some time and learned where she lived. Now, he hid in her bedroom and waited patiently. Around 2 p.m., Catherine returned home with her 19-year-old brother, Kevin. They were immediately startled by Dennis, who emerged from the bedroom with a gun in his hand. But again, things did not go exactly as planned. At some point, Kevin got into a vicious fight with Dennis and was almost able to take the gun from him. But unfortunately, Dennis succeeded in shooting him in the face, twice. As Dennis was sure Kevin was either dead or dying, he moved to work on Catherine, stabbing her in the abdomen and other parts of the body. Meanwhile, as unbelievable as it sounds, Kevin had survived. He ran outside, screaming for help, forcing Dennis to disappear from the scene quickly. By the time his wife Paula had got off work, Dennis was back home and all cleaned up as if nothing had happened. Kevin was fortunate to survive the attack, even though the damage done still affects him today. His sister Catherine, however, died in the hospital. Dennis Rader was proud of what he had done. So proud that he left a note describing how he killed the Oteros stashed inside an engineering book at the Wichita Public Library. Next, Dennis called a local paper, the Wichita Eagle, letting them know where to find his confession letter. As typical to Dennis, the letter was full of misspellings. But he didn't let that stop him from naming himself. "I did it myself with no one's help. The code words for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK. But then, just when Dennis had gotten started, he stopped. Paula told him she was pregnant, and Dennis later claimed he was so excited about family life he forgot about killing. However, his hiatus did not last longer than a few short years. On March 17, 1977, Dennis approached a 5-year-old boy posing as a detective and showed him a picture of his own wife, asking if he had seen her. After the boy answered no, Dennis followed him to his house and knocked on the door. He was allowed in by the children in the house, but as Dennis got face to face with the mother, 24-year-old Shirley Vane, he quickly barricaded the children in the bathroom. Dennis then proceeded to strangle Shirley to death. Once again, he disappeared from the crime scene, leaving behind semen as evidence. Thankfully, the children were later found alive in the bathroom. Even though Dennis maintained his image as an ordinary husband and father, there were some signs that his wife Paula saw but ignored that could have revealed her husband's true identity much earlier. For example, Dennis had written a poem of Shirley, and he marked up newspaper stories of the serial killer with his own secret code. Then to top it off, when Paula saw the published letters from BTK and the horrendous, too familiar misspellings, she only said to her husband, "You spell just like BTK." Of course, there was also a sealed box that Dennis kept that Paula never questioned. What was in the box? Oh, just regular stuff like dead women's underwear, driver's licenses, pictures of Dennis dressed up in his victim's clothing, choking himself and burying himself alive, reenacting his kills. As one does. And so Dennis was able to continue acting out his fantasies. On December 8, 1977, he killed a 25-year-old jewelry store clerk, Nancy Fox, once again leaving semen next to the body. The following day, Dennis called the police, stating, "Yes, you will find a homicide at 843 South Pershing. Nancy Fox, that is correct." Afterward, Wichita police publicly announced there was a serial killer in their quiet little town. But then, after 63-year-old Anna Williams escaped death by returning home much later than expected in 1979, BTK disappeared from the public eye, but people in Wichita continued to live in fear, without answers and closure, unsure whether BTK would strike again. However, while crimes were not connected to BTK anymore for a while, it didn't mean Dennis did not kill at all. On April 27, 1985, the Rader's neighbor, 53-year-old Marnie Hedge was taken from her home and found dead by strangulation 8 days later. Perhaps due to the fact that Marnie was found outside her home, police failed to connect her murder to BTK. The same happened when 28-year-old Vicky Wergel was found strangled in September of 1986. This time, police pursued the husband as the murderer, rather than even thinking about the possibility that BTK was behind the crime. Finally, after 20 years of killing, Dennis took his last victim, 62-year-old Dolores Davis, on January 19, 1991, strangling her to death in her bedroom before dumping her body by a bridge. For some reason, Dennis now felt like he had done enough, and so for over the next decade, BTK dropped off the map and focused on work and family life. By 2004, the investigation of the BTK killer was considered a cold case. But of course, Dennis was too smug not to resurface. Around the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, he sent local media outlets and authorities nearly a dozen taunting letters filled with mementos from his crimes, including pictures, a word puzzle, and an outline for the BTK story. But it was the most unpredictable thing that finally caused BTK's downfall: a floppy disk. In his letters to police, Dennis asked if he sent a floppy disk with his writings, if it could be traced. Not really sure how Dennis ever thought the police would answer him truthfully. Nevertheless, police responded in a newspaper stating that using floppy disks would be safe. Spoiler alert, it was not. When authorities received the floppy disk from BTK, they found the metadata of a deleted Microsoft Word document inside. It was a document for the Christ Lutheran Church, authored by the church council president, Dennis Rader. A serial killer who had gone for decades without any suspicions was now caught because of his arrogance. Dennis's DNA that had been found under his victim's fingernails was compared to his daughter's pap smears to confirm a match. Denis Rader was finally taken from his home and arrested in front of his family on February 25, 2005. Everybody was in shock. No one believed that Denis Rader, husband, father, and church council president, could possibly be a serial killer. Weirdly, even after getting caught, it seemed that Dennis was more excited about the situation than distressed. Now he had an audience to whom he could tell about his crimes in detail. And so Dennis confessed to all 10 murders, clearly getting a twisted joy describing what he had done to all of those women. If you watch the videos taken from the courtroom on June 27, 2005, of Dennis confessing and answering the judge's questions, it sounds like he's telling a story he loves, like he is silently gloating. He's able to remember every single detail and is eager to tell them. Dennis's wife, who had so far believed her husband was innocent, quickly filed for divorce after the confession. And of course, nobody can blame her for that. Here is a portion of that confession.
On that particular day, the 15th day of January, 1974, can you tell me where you went to kill Mr. Joseph Otero?
I think it's 1834, Edgemore.
All right. Can you tell me approximately what time of day you went there?
Somewhere between 7 and 7:30.
This particular location, did you know these people?
No, that's no, that was part of my, I guess my what you call fantasy. These people were selected.
All right. So you.
Okay. Oh.
You were engaged in some kind of fantasy during this period of time?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, when you use the term fantasy, is this something you were doing for your personal pleasure?
Sexual fantasy, sir.
I see. So you went to this residence, and what occurred then?
Basically broke into the house, or didn't break into the house, but when they came out of the house, I came in and confronted the family, and then we went from there.
All right. Had you planned this beforehand?
To some degree, yes. After I got in the house, I lost control of it. But it was, in the back of my mind, I had some ideas what I was going to do. But I basically panicked that first day. So
beforehand, did you know who was there in the house?
I thought Mrs. Otero and the two kids, the two younger kids, were in the house. I didn't realize Mr. Otero was going to be there.
All right. When you went into the house, what happened then?
Well, I confronted the family, pulled a pistol, confronted Mr. Otero, and asked him to, that I was there to basically, I was wanted to get the car. I was hungry, food, I was wanted, and asked him to lie down in the living room. And at that time, I realized that wouldn't be a really good idea. So the dog was a real problem, so I asked Mr. Otero if he could get the dog out. So he had one of the kids put it out. And then I took him back to the bedroom.
You took who back to the bedroom?
The family, to the bedroom, the 4 members.
All right, what happened then?
At that time, I tied him up. They started complaining about being tied up, and I re-loosened the bonds a couple of times. Tried to make Mr. Otero as comfortable as I could. Apparently had a cracked rib from a car accident, so I had him put a pillow down for his head. Had he put I think he used a parka or a coat underneath him. They talked to me about giving the car and whatever money. I guess they didn't have very much money, and there I realized that I didn't have a mask on or anything. They already could ID me, and made a decision to go ahead and put him down, I guess, or strangle him.
All right, what did you do to Joseph Otero Sr.?
Joseph Otero?
Yeah,
Okay.
Joseph Otero Sr., Mr. Otero, the father.
Put a plastic bag over his head and then some cords and then tightened it.
Did he, in fact, suffocate and die as a result of this?
Not right away. No, sir, he didn't.
What happened?
Well, after that, I did Mrs. Otero. I had never strangled anyone before, so I really didn't know how much pressure you had to put on a person or how long it would take. But
Was she also tied up there in the
yes,
bedroom?
yeah, both their hands and their feet were tied up. She was on the bed.
Where were the children?
Josephine was on the bed, and Junior was on the floor this time.
Can you tell me what happened in regards to Joseph?
He moved over real quick, and I think tore a hole in the bag, and I could tell that he was having some problems there. But at that time, the whole family just went panicked on me, so I worked pretty quick.
You worked pretty quick.
Well,
What
I mean,
did you do?
I strangled Mrs. Otero, and she went out, or passed out. I thought she was dead. She passed out. Then I strangled Josephine. She passed out, or I thought she was dead. And then I went over and put a bag on Junior's head. And Mrs. Otero came back. She came back and...
Sir, let me ask you about Joseph Otero Sr. You
Senior?
indicated he had torn a hole in the bag.
Mhm.
And what did you do with him then?
I put another bag over it, or either that or I recollect, I think I put either a cloth or a T-shirt or something over his head, and then another bag, and then tighten it down.
Did he subsequently die?
Well, yes. I didn't just stay there and watch him. That I was moving around the room. But
All right, so you indicated you strangled Mrs. Otero after you had done this. Is that correct?
now I went back and strangled her again. That finally killed her at that time. Went over and then took Junior. Before that, she asked me to save her son. So I actually had taken the bag off, and then I was really upset at that point in time. So basically, when Mr. Otero was down, Mrs. Otero was down, I went ahead and took Junior, I put another bag over his head and took him to the other bedroom at that time.
What did you do then?
Put a bag over his head, I put a cloth over his head, a T-shirt, and a bag so he couldn't tear a hole in it. And he subsequently died from that. And then when I went back, Josephine had woke back up.
What did you do then?
And I took her to the basement and eventually hung her.
Did you do anything else at that time?
Yes, I had some sexual fantasies, but that was after she was hung.
All right. What did you do then?
Went through the house, kind of cleaned it up. It's called the right-hand rule. You go from room to room, picked everything up. I think I took Mr. Otero's watch. I guess I took a radio. I forgot about that, but apparently I took a radio.
Why did you take these things?
I don't know. I have no idea. I got the keys to the car. In fact, I had the keys, I think, earlier before that because I wanted to make sure I had a way of getting out of the house. And cleaned the house up a little bit, make sure everything's packed up, and left through the front door. And went over to their car, and then drove over to Dylan's, left the car there, then eventually walked back to my car.
All right, Mr. Rader, we will now turn to count 5. In that count, it is claimed that on or about the 4th day of April, 1974, in Sedgwick County, Kansas, that you unlawfully killed Catherine Bright, maliciously, willfully, deliberately, and with premeditation by strangulation and stabbing. Can you tell me what occurred on that day?
I don't know how to exactly say that. I had many, what I called them projects. They were different people in the town that I followed, watched. Kathleen Bright was one of the next targets, I guess, as I would indicate.
How did you select her?
Just driving by one day, and I saw her go in the house with somebody else, and I thought that's a possibility. There was many places in the area. College Hill, they're all over Wichita. But anyway, it just was basically a selection process. Worked toward it. If it didn't work, I just move on to something else. But my kind of person, stalking and strolling. You go through the trolling stage and then a stalking stage. She was in the stalking stage when this happened.
All right, sir. So you identified Catherine Bright as a potential victim.
Yes, sir.
What did you do then here in Sedgwick County?
On this particular day,
yes.
I broke into the house and waited for her to come home.
What happened then?
She and Kevin Bright came in. I wasn't expecting him to be there. And come find out, I guess they were related. That time I approached him and told him I was wanted in California, needed some car. Basically the same thing that I told the Oteros. Kind of ease them, make them feel better. And proceeded to, I think I had him tie her up first, and then I tied him up, or vice versa. I don't remember right now.
Let me ask, you indicated you had some items to tie these people with. Did you bring these items, both the Oteros and this location? The
Oteros I did. I'm not really sure on the Brights. If I had brought my stuff and used my stuff, Kevin would probably be dead today. I'm not bragging on that. It's just a matter of fact. It's the bonds I tied him up with that he broke them. So,
tell me what happened then.
Okay, I moved. After I really can't remember, Judge, whether I had her tie him up or she tied him up. But anyway, I moved her to another bedroom, and he was already secure there by the bed. I tied his feet to the bedpost, on the bedpost, so he couldn't run. Kind of tied her in the other bedroom, and then I came back to strangle him. And at that time, we had a fight.
Were you armed with a handgun at that time also?
Yes, I had a handgun.
What happened when you came back?
I actually had 2 handguns. When I started strangling, either the parent broke or he broke his bonds, and he jumped up real quick like. I pulled my gun and quickly shot him, hit him in the head. He fell over. I could see the blood, and as far as I was concerned, I thought he was down. He started to strangle Catherine, and then we started fighting because bonds weren't very good, and so back and forth we fought.
You and Catherine?
Yeah, we fought, and I got the best of her, and I thought she was going down, and then I could hear some movement in the other room. So I went back, and Kevin, no, I thought she was going down. I went back to the other bedroom where Kevin was at, and I tried to re-strangle him at that time. And he jumped up, and we fought, and he at that time shot me because he got the other pistol that was in my shoulder here. I had my magnum in my shoulder, and we fought at that point in time, and I thought it was going to go off. I jammed the gun, stuck my finger in there, jammed it. And I think he thought that was the only gun I had, because once I either bit his finger or hit him or something got away, and I used the .22 and shot him one more time. And I thought he was down for good at that time.
All right, so you shot him a second time.
Yes, sir.
What happened then?
Went back to finish the job on Catherine. And at that point in time, I've been fighting her. And then I heard I don't know whether I was basically losing control. The strangulation wasn't working on her, and I used a knife on her. I stabbed her She said he stabbed 2 or 3 times, either here or here. Maybe 2 back here and 1 here, or maybe just 2 times back here.
You were pointing to your lower back and your
Yeah, underneath the ribs.
and your lower abdomen.
Yeah, underneath the ribs, up underneath the ribs.
So after you stabbed her, what happened?
Well, it's a total mess because I didn't have control on it. She was bleeding, and she went down. I think I just went back to check on Kevin, or at that basically same time I heard him escape. It could be one of the two. But all of a sudden the front door of the house was open and he was gone. And I tell you what I thought. I thought the police were coming at that time. I heard the door open. I thought, no, that's it. And I stepped out there, and I could see him running down the street. So I quickly cleaned up everything that I could and left.
Now let's turn to count number 6. In that count, they claim on March 17th, 1977, that you unlawfully killed Shirley Vianne maliciously, willfully, deliberately, and with premeditation by strangulation. Can you tell me what you did on that day?
Actually, on that one, she was completely random. There was actually someone across from Dillon's was a potential target. That particular day, I drove to Dillon's, parked in the parking lot, watched this particular residence, and then got out of the car and walked over to it. Knocked. Nobody answered it. So I was all keyed up. So I just started going through the neighborhood. I'd been through the neighborhood before. I kind of knew a little of the layout of the neighborhood. I've been through the back alleys, knew where some certain people live. While I was walking down Hydraulic, I met a young boy and asked him if he ID'd some pictures. Noticed where he went and went to that house, and we went from there.
Now you call these projects, were these sexual fantasies also?
Potential hits. Yeah, in my world, that's what I call them.
So
They're
you
called
went,
projects, hits.
all right, and why did you have these potential hits? Was this to gratify some sexual interest? Or?
Yes, sir. I had a lot of them, so it's just if one didn't work out, I just moved to another one.
Right.
Knocked on the door and told him I was a private detective. Showed him a picture that I had just showed the boy and asked him if they could ID the picture. And at that time, I had the gun here, and I just kind of forced myself in. I just walked in, just opened the door, walked in, and then pulled the pistol. I told Miss Vianne that I had a problem with sexual fantasies, that I was going to tie her up, and that I might have to tie the kids up, and that she would cooperate with me at that time. We went back. She was extremely nervous. I think she even smoked a cigarette. And we went back to one of the back areas of the porch, explained to her that I had done this before. And I think she would, at that point in time, I think she was sick because she had her night robe on. And I think I remember right, she had been sick. And I think she came out of the bedroom when I went in the house. So anyway, we went back to her bedroom, and I proceeded to tie the kids up, and they started crying and got real upset. So I said, "No, this is not going to work." So we moved them to the bathroom. She helped me, and then I tied the doors shut. We put some toys and blankets and odds and ends in there for the kids, make them as comfortable as we could. We tied one of the bathroom doors shut so they couldn't open it, and then she went back and helped me shove the bed up against the other bathroom door. And then I proceeded to tie her up. She got sick, threw up, got her a glass of water, comforted her a little bit, and then I went ahead and tied her up, and then put a bag over her head and strangled her.
All right, what happened then?
Well, the kids were really banging on the door, hollering, screaming, and then the telephone rang, and they had talked about earlier that the neighbor was going to check on them, so I cleaned everything up real quick and got out of there, left, and went back into my car.
All right, in count 7, it is claimed that on the 8th day of December, 1977, in Sedgwick County, Kansas, that you unlawfully killed a human being, that being Nancy Fox, maliciously, willfully, deliberately, and with premeditation by strangulation. Can you tell me what you did on that day here in Sedgwick County?
Nancy Fox was another one of the projects. When I was trolling the area, I noticed her go in the house one night. Sometimes anyway, I put her down as a potential victim.
Let me ask you one thing, Mr. Rader. You used that term when you were patrolling the area. What do you mean by that?
It's called stalking or trolling.
So you were not working in any form or fashion. You were just...
I don't know if you read much about serial killers, they go through what they call the different phases. That's one of the phases they go through as a trolling stage. You're looking for a victim at that time, and that you could be trolling for months or years. But once you lock in on a certain person, then you become stalking, and that might be several of them. But you really home in on that person.
All right, so you basically identified Nancy Fox as one of your projects. What happened then?
At first, she was spotted, and then I did a little homework. I dropped by once to check the mailbox to see what her name was, found out where she worked, stopped by there once at Hillsburg, kind of sized her up. The more I knew about a person, the more I felt comfortable with it. So I did that a couple of times. And then I just selected a night, which was this particular night, to try it, and it worked out.
All right. Can you tell me what you did on the night of December 8th, 1977?
Now, about 2 or 3 blocks away, I parked my car and walked to that residence. Knocked at the door first to make sure, see if anybody was in there, because I knew she arrived home at a particular time from where she worked. Nobody answered the door, so I went around to the back of the house, cut the phone lines. I could tell that there wasn't anybody in the north apartment. Broke in and waited for her to come home in the kitchen.
All right. Did she come home?
Yes, she did.
What happened?
I confronted her, told her there I was had a problem, sexual problem, that I would have to tie her up and have sex with her. She was a little upset. We talked for a while. She smoked a cigarette. While we smoked a cigarette, I went through her purse, identifying some stuff. And she finally said, well, let's get this over with so I can go call the police. I said, okay. And she said, can I go to the bathroom? I said, yes. She went to the bathroom, and I told her when she came out to make sure that she was undressed. And when she came out, I handcuffed her.
You handcuffed her? You had a pair of handcuffs?
Yes, sir.
What happened then?
Well, anyway, I handcuffed her, had her lay on the bed, and then I tied her feet, and then I was also undressed to a certain degree, and then I got on top of her, and then I reached over, took either her feet were tied or not tied. But anyway, I think I had a belt. I took the belt and then strangled her with a belt at that time.
All right. After you had strangled her, what happened then?
Okay. After I strangled her with the belt, I took the belt off and retied that with pantyhose, real tight. Removed the handcuffs and tied those with pantyhose. Can't remember the colors right now. I think I maybe retied her feet. What they had not already, they were probably already tied. Her feet were, and at that time, masturbated, sir.
All right. Had you had sexual relations with her before?
No. I told her I was, but I did not.
So you masturbated, then what did you do?
Dressed and then went through the house, took some of her personal items, and kind of cleaned the house up, went through it, checked everything, and then left.
In count 8, it is claimed that on or about the 27th day of April 1985 to the 28th day of April 1985 in Sedgwick County, Kansas, it is claimed that you unlawfully killed a human being, Maureen Hedge, maliciously, willfully, deliberately, and with premeditation by strangulation. Can you tell me what occurred on that day?
Well, actually, kind of like the others, she was chosen. I went through the different phases, stalking phase, and since she lived down the street from me, I could watch the coming and going quite easily.
All right. When you walked over there, what happened next?
Well, as before, I was going to have sexual fantasies, so I brought my hit kit, and lo and behold, her car was there. I thought, gee, she's not supposed to be home. So I very carefully snuck into the house, kind of like a cat burglar, and after checking the house, she wasn't there. So about that time, the doors rattled, so went back to one of the bedrooms and hid back there in one of the bedrooms. She came in with a male visitor. They were there for maybe an hour or so. He left. I waited till wee hours in the morning and then proceeded to sneak into her bedroom and flip the lights on with quick light, or I think the bathroom lights. I didn't want to flip her lights on, and she screamed, and I jumped on the bed and strangled her manually.
You indicated this woman lived down the street from you. Did she know you?
Casually, we'd walk by and wave. She liked to work in her yard as well as I liked to work. It's just a neighborly type thing. It wasn't anything personal. I mean, just a neighbor.
All right, what did you do then?
After that, since I was in the sexual fantasy, I went ahead and stripped her, and probably went ahead and I'm not sure if I tied her up at that point in time. But anyway, she was nude, and I put her on a blanket, went through her purse, some personal items in the house, figured out how I was going to get her out of there. Eventually moved her to the trunk of the car. Took the car over to Christ Lutheran Church. This is with the older church. And took some pictures of her. She was already dead, so I took pictures of her in different forms of bondage. And that's probably what got me in trouble was the bondage thing. So anyway, that's probably the main thing. But anyway, after that, I moved her back out to the car, and then we went east on 53rd.
All right, what occurred then?
Sir?
What happened then?
Trying to find a place to hide the body.
Did you find a place?
Yes, I did.
Where?
Couldn't tell you without looking at a map, but it was on 53rd, between Greenwich, maybe.
Sir, in count 9, it is claimed on or about the 16th day of September 1986 in Sedgwick County, Kansas, that you unlawfully killed a human being, Vicki Wegerle. Can you tell me what you did here in Sedgwick County on that day that makes you believe you are guilty?
Again, Vicki Wegerle was another potential victim. I went through those different phases, locked in on her, as I would call it. I used Roos as a telephone repairman to get in their house. Drove there in my own personal car around lunchtime. As I approached it, I could hear a piano sound. And went to this other door, knocked on them, and told them we were recently working on telephone repairs in the area. And went to her and knocked on the door and asked her if I could come check her telephone lines inside.
Did she allow you in?
Yes, she did.
What happened then?
Went over and found out where the telephone was, simulated that I was checking the telephone. I had a make-believe instrument, and after she was looking away, I drew a pistol at her and asked her if she'd go back to the bedroom with me. She was very upset, and I think I used some material that was in, and that's another thing. I'm not sure, but I think I used the material that they had in their bedroom. And after I tied her hands, she broke that, and we started fighting. And we fought quite a bit back and forth. Finally got the hand on her and got a nylon sock and started strangling. After she was down and not moving anymore, I rearranged her clothes a little bit and took some quick photos. I think 3 of them, if I remember. And then after that, there was a lot of commotion. She had mentioned something about her husband coming home. So I got out there pretty quick. The dogs were raising a lot of cane in the back. The windows were all open to the house. A lot of noise when we were fighting. So I left pretty quickly after that. Put everything in the briefcase and had her. I'd already gone through her purse and got the keys to the car and used her car for my getaway car.
All right, now you indicate that you thought that she was dead. Did you discover later that she was not dead?
Yes, I guess the paramedics arrived and they tried to attempt to revive her. And that failed. I don't know if she died there or on the way to the hospital or at the hospital. I don't recollect.
But you later found out that she did die as a result of your strangulation.
Yes.
Now, sir, let's turn to count 10. That you did then and there unlawfully kill a human being, that being Dolores E. Davis, maliciously, willfully, deliberately, and with premeditation. Mr. Rader, please tell me what you did here in Sedgwick County, Kansas on that day that makes you believe you're guilty.
That particular day, I had some commitments. I left those, went to one place, changed my clothes, went to another place, parked my car, finally made arrangements on my hit kit, my clothes, and then walked to that residence. I finally just selected a concrete block and threw it through the plate glass window on the east and came on in. She came out of the bedroom and thought that a car had hit her house. And I told her that I used the roofs of being wanted. I was on the run. I needed food, car, warm up. and I asked her, handcuffed her, and kind of talked to her, told her that I would like to get some food, get her keys to her car, and kind of rest assured, talked with her a little bit, calmed her down a little bit, stimulated getting some food, odds and ends in the house that Aliko was leaving. Then went back and removed her handcuffs and then tied her up and then eventually strangled her.
What did you strangle her with?
Pantyhose.
All right, what happened then?
Kind of like Mrs. Hedge. I already figured out I had a plan on leaving and put her in a blanket and drug her to the car and put her in the trunk of the car.
So you were able to strangle her to death with these pantyhose?
Yes, sir.
So all of these incidents, these 10 counts, occurred because you wanted to satisfy a sexual fantasy. Is that correct?
Yes.
In the end, on August 18th, 2005, Dennis Rader was sentenced to 175 years in jail without the possibility of parole, as Kansas did not have the death penalty at the time of the murders. During his sentencing, Dennis made the courtroom listen to a rambling 20-minute apology. He had not really given any explanation for his rampage, other than saying the usual, quote, "I actually think I may be possessed with demons." Dennis Rader definitely had some demons inside him, not due to possession, but from the deepest, darkest places of a human mind. Today, he is 76 years old, serving his sentence at El Dorado Correctional Facility. For Dennis's children, reconciling him with the BTK killer has been difficult. After all, they had a normal, happy childhood with their father as long as it lasted. And so to Carrie and Brian, Dennis and BTK are entirely different people. Still, Carrie says it's hard not to think about what if their father would have been caught after his first 2 murders. Then she and her brother would never have been born. She said, quote, "There is almost a guilt there for being alive. They died, and you got to live." That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. Thanks for joining, and if you are not subscribed to 10-Minute Murder, take a quick second to do that before you go. All you have to do to subscribe is press the subscribe button. It's pretty simple. Now, it's not that simple. I lied. It may not say subscribe. It might say follow or collect. A lot of the times it says subscribe, but just depends on where you listen. But if you listen on Apple Podcasts, the top right-hand corner, there's a little plus button. Unless they've changed it for the 47th time. I don't know. But if you press that, you'll be subscribed. If you are subscribed and have not connected with 10-Minute Murder on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, let's go ahead and sort that out. Links for that are in the show notes of this episode, or just type 10-Minute Murder into the search bar wherever you want to follow, and it'll pop right up. Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Murder. Stay safe, and good night.